The sea roared beneath a gray February sky as the American fleet approached the small volcanic island of Iwo Jima. To most, it looked like nothing, a dark ashen rock barely 8 square miles wide. But beneath that scorched surface lay a fortress, and inside its tunnels waited 21,000 Japanese soldiers ready to die. They called it the Fortress of Sulphur. The island stank of death even before the battle began, a smell of volcanic gas and fear. The sand was black and coarse, swallowing the boots of every Marine who tried to run. Every inch of that island would have to be earned in blood. General Tadamichi Kuribayashi knew what was coming. He had studied the enemy, the overwhelming American firepower, the endless bombers, the steel ships that darkened the sea. He knew Iwo Jima could not be saved, but he believed it could be made to cost so much that the Americans would think twice before invading Japan itself. So he built a trap. For months his men dug into the earth like ghosts. They carved a maze of tunnels, 11 miles of connected bunkers, hidden artillery and command posts. The island became a living tomb, designed not for victory, but for annihilation. Above them, the Americans believed they had already destroyed the garrison. For 72 consecutive days, naval guns and bombers pounded the island. The ground trembled, the mountains cracked, and the ocean burned. When the last shell fell, they thought nothing could have survived. But beneath that shattered crust, the Japanese waited, silent, invisible, unbroken. On February 19th, 1945, as the first wave of Marines landed, the black sand swallowed their feet. The beach offered no cover. Men fell before they even fired a shot. Machine guns, hidden in the cliffs, opened up in unison, a storm of steel tearing through the ranks. The air filled with screams and volcanic dust. To the Americans, it felt like the gates of hell had opened. Every bunker they destroyed seemed to come alive again minutes later. Every cave they cleared echoed with the cries of men who refused to surrender. The Marines advanced yard by yard, crawling over the dead and through fire. For Kuribayashi, this was not a defense. It was a slow execution. His plan was working. Every Marine killed was another message to the enemy. You will never take Japan easily. The island's geography was a nightmare. Mount Suribachi, the volcano at the southern tip, loomed over everything like a dark god. From its summit, Japanese gunners had a perfect view of the beaches below. Taking it would cost hundreds of lives, but without it, the Americans could never move forward. Day after day, the Marines climbed, slipping in ash, ducking under fire, dragging wounded comrades behind them. The mountain was alive with gunfire, the air thick with sulfur smoke. When they finally reached the top, they raised the American flag, a small piece of cloth that became a symbol for an entire war. But down below, the battle was far from over. Kuribayashi's men still held the northern half of the island, a labyrinth of bunkers, trenches, and hidden strongholds. They fought from the shadows, emerging only to strike and then vanish back underground. The Marines soon realized they were fighting not men but the island itself. As days turned into weeks, the toll grew unbearable. Flamethrowers roared into caves, grenades rolled into darkness, and still the defenders fought on. The smell of sulfur mixed with blood. The sky was a permanent gray. No one slept. No one smiled. Letters home turned into confessions, men writing to wives and mothers that they might not make it back. This place, one Marine wrote, is what hell must look like. The Japanese, too, knew the end was near. Food was gone. Ammunition dwindled. The tunnels were filled with the wounded whispering prayers in the dark. Yet Kuribayashi refused to surrender. He ordered his men to fight in silence, to conserve every bullet until it could take one more enemy down. On the surface, bulldozers carved roads through what was once paradise. The Americans brought in tanks and artillery, turning the island into a smoking ruin. Every cave they sealed was another tomb, every explosion another heartbeat of the dying island. By March, the beaches were lined with wreckage. The smell of death was everywhere. On the wind, in the sand, in the ocean spray. The once black beaches had turned red. The Japanese had become shadows, fighting in groups of 10, then 5, then 1. At night, they crept out of the tunnels to stab or shoot before vanishing again. The Marines called them ghosts of the crater. Kuribayashi sent his last radio message in the early days of March. His voice was calm. "The enemy has advanced. We will fight to the end." After that, silence. The final attack came before dawn, a suicidal banzai charge of the last defenders. They came out of the tunnels screaming, rifles and bayonets flashing in the dark. Hundreds of them charged into machine gun fire, determined to die with honor. It was the last breath of the island's spirit. When it was over, 21,000 Japanese were gone. Only 216 were taken alive. The rest had vanished into the smoke and ash of Iwo Jima. The Americans paid a terrible price too. Nearly 7,000 dead, more than 20,000 wounded. For a rock barely visible on a map, the cost was unimaginable, but strategically it changed everything. Iwo Jima became an airbase for bombers, a place for damaged planes to land safely on their way back from Japan. It shortened the war, but at a cost no one could ever forget. The survivors said the island was cursed. Even months later, soldiers reported hearing whispers in the tunnels, echoes of men who refused to die. Today, Iwo Jima is silent. The black sand still burns under the sun. The tunnels remain, sealed and dark, a monument to duty, madness, and sacrifice. For Japan, it was a story of honor. For America, a symbol of perseverance. For the world, a reminder that even victory can look like loss. The crater took them all. The island that was supposed to delay the inevitable became the grave of 21,000 souls, a wound in the ocean that never healed. And so, when historians speak of the Pacific War, they speak of Midway, Okinawa, and Hiroshima. But always, they whisper the name Iwo Jima. Because it was there, on that cursed island of sulfur and ash, that humanity reached the edge of what it could endure, and looked into the abyss. The smoke cleared slowly over the island, revealing only silence. The battle was over, but Iwo Jima did not feel like victory. It felt like a graveyard. The air still shimmered with heat, and beneath the ash, bodies slept where they had fallen. Japanese and American alike, brothers now in the same infernal soil. The Marines walked through what was left of the tunnels, flashlights trembling in their hands. The walls were scorched, carved with Japanese characters, last messages to loved ones, words of apology, loyalty, or faith. Some wrote to the emperor, others wrote to their mothers, and many simply drew a circle, the rising sun of Japan, before ending their lives with grenades clutched to their chests. They had fought not just a battle, but an idea, the idea that death was preferable to surrender. And in those tunnels, that idea had taken root so deeply that even the fire of flamethrowers couldn't erase it. The Americans gathered the few prisoners who remained, stunned, starving, too weak to speak. They were doctors, engineers, and soldiers who had followed orders until the end. One of them whispered, "We were never meant to live." At sea, the surviving fleet watched the island fade into smoke. For them, the cost of taking Iwo Jima was too high to celebrate. Every man knew someone who hadn't made it off the beach. Back in the United States, the photograph of the flag raising on Mount Suribachi became legend. Newspapers called it the symbol of triumph, the image that captured the soul of victory. But the men who were there knew the truth, that behind that single moment lay days of unending horror, of courage mixed with despair. For the Japanese command, Iwo Jima was both tragedy and prophecy. They had seen what total war against America meant. Kuribayashi's defense had proven that even the bravest could not stop the inevitable. Yet his tactics, the tunnel system, the delay, the resistance, inspired the final defense of Okinawa months later. Japan's generals praised him posthumously, but the emperor's court remained silent. To them, it was not a victory worth honoring, only a grim reminder that Japan was bleeding to death. In Tokyo, families waited for letters that would never arrive. Mothers lined up outside military offices, clutching photographs of sons who would never return. The word Iwo Jima spread like a curse through the cities. Some whispered it as a point of pride, others as a warning that the war was already lost. Meanwhile, the Americans turned the island into a forward base. Engineers leveled the beaches, filled in craters, and built runways over the bones of the fallen. Soon, B-29 bombers began to land, silver giants gliding over the same ground that had consumed thousands. Each landing saved lives, shortening the war. But for those who had fought there, it felt like a quiet desecration. At night, the workers reported strange things. Whispers in the wind, footsteps in the tunnels they had sealed, voices calling names no one recognized. Some refused to work after dark. They said the island still breathed, that its dead were restless. A chaplain who served on Iwo Jima wrote in his diary, "We stand upon sacred ground. It feels wrong to dig, to build, to live here. This island is still alive with pain." He was right. Beneath the ground, hundreds of tunnels remained unexplored, sealed chambers where men still sat in death, rifles clutched, helmets in their laps. When Japanese recovery teams returned years later, they found them exactly as they had died, in formation, facing the direction of the sea. Kuribayashi's body was never found. Some say he died leading a final counterattack. Others believe he took his own life in the tunnels alongside his men. But his spirit lived on, in the discipline, in the silence, in the sense of duty that marked every inch of that doomed island. For the Americans, Iwo Jima became a symbol of sacrifice and the price of victory. For Japan, it became the embodiment of honor in defeat. And for the world, it became a warning that war, once unleashed, consumes everything, leaving only ghosts and memory. Years later, survivors from both sides met again. Old men with trembling hands standing under the same gray sky. They spoke not of glory, but of loss. One Japanese survivor bowed deeply before the American veterans. "We fought as enemies," he said, "but now we share one sorrow." The American replied softly, "We were all trapped in that crater." The island itself changed little over the decades. The black sand still burns your feet at noon. The winds still carry the scent of sulfur and sea. The caves remain sealed, their entrances overgrown, as if nature itself wanted to bury what humanity could not. Pilots flying overhead still look down at the strange shape of the island, a wound in the Pacific. Few realize how many bones rest beneath it. And yet, in that stillness, Iwo Jima holds a strange peace. It stands as a monument not to victory, but to endurance, to men who faced impossible odds and refused to break. Today the island belongs to Japan again. A single airstrip remains, and the occasional ceremony honors the dead of both nations. But beneath every step, history whispers. When the wind howls across the crater, it sounds almost like the echo of marching boots. When the waves crash on the black shore, they carry the rhythm of distant gunfire. The ghosts of Iwo Jima do not rest, because they do not need to. Their story is told every time someone looks at that photograph, or reads their letters, or stands in silence before a flag that once flew above a volcano of fire. 21,000 souls lost, not for victory, but for the belief that some things must be defended to the last breath. The trap of Iwo Jima was never meant to be escaped. It was meant to be remembered. And so it is. The crater remains, silent, vast, eternal. The sea still roars around it as if guarding what lies within. Time has covered the scars, but not the truth. Beneath that black sand lies the story of men who looked into the abyss and did not look away. The trap of Iwo Jima did not just consume an army. It consumed an era, the final heartbeat before the end of the empire. And in the end, it gave the world a lesson carved in ash. That courage and madness often share the same face, and that sometimes, even in total defeat, humanity reveals its greatest strength.